Hey guys, it's Ahmad with Lead and Steel. Today we're talking subguns. Stay tuned. Now, what are submachine guns? Submachine guns are smaller rifles that are chambered in pistol caliber rounds. They allow for a higher rate of fire, lower recoil, pretty healthy magazine capacity, and the ability to be suppressed. Most importantly, they're compact weapon systems. You can see how relatively small this is as compared to something like a battle rifle or a shotgun or something like that. And they're relatively lightweight for what they are. So, starting in the 60s or so, these things really found their niche. And a bunch of, counterterrorism units, law enforcement, hostage rescue, that sort of stuff. These things really took off. And of course, we can't talk about anything taking off without H&K. Heckler & Koch has been making very prolific firearms for quite a many decades, and this includes, of course, the MP5. You and I both know what this gun is, and thanks to movies, TV shows, video games, even your favorite Korean documentary about marine life had a bunch of the MP5 in there. Now, the MP5 operates on what's considered a delayed blowback system, specifically a roller delayed blowback system. There are two rollers that stick out on the side of the bolt head that slow down the bolt velocity when this thing is chugging along, and so it allows for a lighter bolt carrier group to make up for that added friction. What that means ultimately to the end user is much less recoil. Part of the reason why this saw so much success is because operators could put 3 to 5 shots with a burst on a target without, very much sight movement at all. The sights themselves are also very intuitive. They have this diopter system that allows for a circle within a circle, so it's quick to pick up and quick to get on target. Even in this semi-automatic configuration, this firearm is extremely soft shooting. Now, as compared to all the other subguns, this thing outclasses them all in the recoil department. I mean, put it in the hands of any newbie and they'll immediately understand why shooting is so much fun. Rigging steel with this thing is a breeze. Now, ultimately, the MP5 had a great run, but it was replaced by and large with weapons like the Mark 18, the G36C, even some bullpups. These are intermediate cartridge rifles with far better terminal ballistics and a larger envelope of engagement distance as compared to the 9mm MP5, but they give you overall a very similar size and weight. So the question becomes, why is this weapon even relevant, right? Why are subguns relevant to begin with? If you can just get a Mark 18 and suppress that bad boy, nothing else really in its class is going to outdo it for the size and weight. That's ultimately up to you. For the purposes of this presentation, we're talking about delayed blowback guns only. The whole point of delayed blowback is to provide for an even lighter recoiling impulse than compared to like a G36 or an M4 carbine or something like that. Because traditional blowback guns, straight blowback guns like an AR-9, they're generally going to recoil more than some of those 5.56 counterparts. And at that point, really, there's no point of getting those guns. Now, if you just want a range toy or something like that, obviously that doesn't matter. That's outside of this discussion. Any single one of these firearms is going to be perfect for that. So for those purposes, the roller delayed blowback MP5 is an awesome option. It recoils extremely light, very fun at the range. Obviously, the lines are very classic. This is in practically every aspect of the media. And so if you want something for the lore and for the video games, this is definitely it. And as a range toy, obviously, it checks that box too. However, this weapon system isn't perfect. It was still designed in the 60s. And so you have to contend with some of the shortcomings that comes with. Realistically, the method of operation is slightly different than a traditional AR or other subgun. You have this system where the gun's going to run dry. You're not going to have a last round bolt hold open, so all you'll get is a click instead of a bang. So that kind of adds some time into the in the reloading department. And the reload itself is slightly different than what you traditionally expect. Lock the bolt to the rear of the charging handle, take out your magazine, insert the fresh mag, and then ceremonially smack that sucker like a GTA prostitute. Even though the design cues and some of the manufacturing techniques were out of the Cold War, still the thing is modular for what it is. So you can swap out the stock, grip, handguard, etc. With just a push of a few pins real quick. This particular model has a Knight's Armament handguard and a traditional A2 stock. Very comfy, very fun to shoot at the range. Now, there are a few more nitpicks that I can talk about when it comes to the MP5. One is going to be the trigger press. It's kind of a heavy trigger pull. It's kind of gritty, kind of long. And so, fast follow-up shots and semi-auto are a little hard to do as compared to something like the APC, which we'll talk about, or the Banshee, which can take AR triggers. Now, although the disassembly of the firearm is relatively easy, actually cleaning it is a little tricky, mainly because it's a clamshell receiver design. because it's, again, stamped sheet metal and welded together. And so trying to get into those crevices, especially where the rollers are, is a little difficult. Optics mounting on the MP5 is also a little different. You can use like a claw style adapter if you have something like an HK. I know PTR makes their domestic version with a welded top rail, so that kind of solves that issue, but don't mess with these beautiful lines, man. This thing just looks so damn cool without a rail. I talked about this gun being practically indestructible. It is. However, there is one small fault in the extractor design, and that's how the spring is manufactured and the way it sits against the extractor. You're going to lose tension on that thing after a few thousand rounds, and so it's best to keep a few of those springs handy. Now, the last con that I want to talk about is going to be cost of ownership. Getting into an MP5, especially an HK MP5, is going to be a few $1,000s affair. If you want something like a clone gun, something that's a contract gun, be it Turkish or domestic made, you're going to look at around $1,700-ish starting. Magazines are pricey. These are just stamped sheet metal mags, you know, that are laser welded, but they're still close to $100 a piece. Again, the contract mag is going to be a little cheaper, but still, it's going to be a little pricey to get into. All things being equal, the MP5 is an excellent option if you want a fun range toy, something that's reliable and durable, something that has a huge proliferation in media and TV and stuff like that. And especially if you're recoil sensitive. Like I said, this is the lightest recoiling gun in this presentation. Now, I'm no subject matter expert when it comes to the MP5, but if you want to know more about this weapon system, there's one channel that I recommend, and that is Tofu Hunt Tactical. That man knows a lot about the MP5 and can definitely help you in your purchasing decision. Ultimately, the MP5 is not perfect, like we talked about, and if you need something that's even more practical, something that's even smaller and lighter and faster on target, something that you can shoot even quicker in semi-auto, and most importantly, something that can feed hollow point ammunition that's kind of tricky in some of these MP5s, the next weapon might check that box for you. Now, the next weapon on this list is the B&T APC9. This is a weapon system that technically shouldn't be on the list because it is a straight blowback design. However, there's a buffer system inside the receiver that slows down that bolt velocity, and so ultimately, you get a recoil impulse that's similar to some of the other delayed blowback guns on the market. Not as smooth and as light as the MP5, but makes up for it with some other cool features. Now, B&T has been making a lot of these guns for quite some time. In fact, they just won the U.S. Army Subcompact Weapon System program. And so this thing is, you know, tested for what it is, and it works great. Now, this gun does come with like the Glock lower compatibility and the SIG P320 mag compatibility. My mental faculties are still present, so I went ahead and got the standard B&T straight mag. Now, when it comes to size and weight, the APC is a real winner as compared to something like the MP5. You can see that size right there is quite noticeable. So much so that the MP5K, that is the shorter variety that HK manufactured, is still longer than the APC9. And there's an APC9K, even smaller than this. That's super, super tiny. So this thing definitely checks off the box if you're looking for a very, very small weapon system. Manufacturing this thing is also different from the MP5 in the sense that there are 21st century manufacturing techniques. A lot of this is CNC'd aluminum, hard coat anodized, that sort of stuff. And so taking this thing apart and cleaning it is a real piece of cake. Now, the manual of controls on the APC9 is a little more intuitive as compared to the MP5. You have ambidextrous controls, both bolt catch and bolt release. You have a non-reciprocating charging handle that's present on both sides. You can put AR grips in this thing and AR triggers. And the trigger that comes with this from the factory is actually pretty darn good. It's got a very light weight, right around, I think, 4.5, 5 pounds or so, and a very short take-up. So you can definitely get those split pairs nice and close. The downside of the ambidextrous controls mainly is going to be the safety. The safety is hard to actuate, and for whatever reason with my hands in this particular pistol grip, digs into my index finger. And so there are some companies out there that delete that right side safety. I think HBI is one of them, and they also lighten up that spring so it's easier to engage and disengage. Now, this gun was designed in the 21st century, and so it feeds hollow points just fine. In this particular model, we tested some Federal jacketed hollow points and didn't have any issues whatsoever. The downside from the feeding system is going to be the magazine fragility. These mags are made of polymer, and when they're fully loaded and they're dropped, You could break them, crack them, shatter them, etc. Not really something that you see with the MP5 or like a Colt AR9 or something. Definitely keep a few of these mags handy. They're not that expensive. I've seen them as low as like 30 bucks a pop. The barrel on this particular model is tri-lug ready, so you can put whatever cans you're going to put on that MP5 right on this guy. And in terms of suppressing the APC9, there are no real changes that you need to make to the weapon system to get it suppressor ready. The MP5, for example, requires the use of a different, I believe the term is a locking bar or locking piece, I think. And that slows down the bolt a little bit, particularly on the MP5K. This thing requires no modification at all, just plug and play. Now the cost of entry to the B&T is similar to the MP5 in the sense that it's pricey. These guns start at about $2,200 or so. Mags thankfully are not that expensive. However, as soon as you put like a stock, tax stamp, you know, optic, whatever, you're looking at close to $3,000. And the last nitpick that I'm going to talk about is the fact that because it's technically a straight blowback gun, it's a little louder to suppress as compared to the MP5. It also gets a little dirtier. Ultimately, I'm no expert when it comes to the APC9, although I love the weapon system. I don't know the ins and outs as well as some of the other guys out there that do. If you want to learn more about this weapon system, go ahead and head over to the 1911 Syndicate channel. Jake and Chris know what they're doing, particularly with the APC9. They both own a copy of this fantastic firearm, and so they can kind of help guide your purchasing decision if you so choose. Now the third weapon in this presentation is a gun that's modeled after the APC9. Say you want something that's similar to the APC9 with CNC aluminum, but you want some of the benefits of the roller delayed action of the MP5 for that lighter recoil, and you want to save some money. This weapon is not that weapon. This thing sucks. This is the Stribog SP9A3. This thing was modeled after the APC9, and let me tell you, the theme that I want to use with this weapon system is afterthought. Okay, there are many afterthoughts on this gun, and it's readily apparent as soon as you pick it up. Now, the SP9A3 differs from the SP9A1. The SP9A1 is a direct blowback variant, and that thing works fantastic. If you want to know more about that, head over to Phil and TC's channel, Cawthron Trust. Now those two do a lot when it comes to the Stribog, and they know a lot about that weapon system, and the A1 works pretty much okay. The A1 is straight blowback like we talked about, and so it utilized a large and heavy bolt carrier group. And so what that did was allowed for the weapon to be safely fired in that blowback configuration. But when they updated it to the A3 for that roller delayed action and shortened that bolt carrier group length, they didn't do anything to compensate for that added distance that it's traveling now. So what happens is the bolt ends up moving past the ejection port even further, causing crazy malfunctions. That extracted case will end up sitting inside the lower receiver, and trust me, that's a hard stop malfunction. You are not going to clear this thing in the field when that happens. Now the SP9A3 can be remedied with an HBI block that sits inside of the receiver, shortens that bolt throw so it's not moving too deep into the receiver, and it gets you that ejection that you want to see. Now the ejection pattern is still kind of all over the place. It's not really confidence inspiring, but you know, it's okay. For the most part, it still functions fine. The back end of the receiver can use an HBI adapter plate, which allows it to use braces and stocks. You can throw a B&T stock on this thing, you can throw a brace on there. It bolts on just fine, no problems at all. Now the lower receiver is polymer like the APC9. Safety selector just kind of feels like it was pulled out of an airsoft gun. The trigger pull, although the trigger shoe itself is flat, don't let it fool you. It's not a nice trigger. It's like 7 pounds with a lot of creep. The bolt catch itself looks like some sort of Cold War implement. It's like stamped sheet metal. And the spring that gives it pressure just kind of juts out into the receiver. So you gotta be very careful with your bore snakes, because if anything gets caught on that thing, it can bend it out of place. I have a buddy of mine who had that very same issue. And in order to replace that spring, you know, after it gets bent, you have to pull the freaking barrel out of the gun. It's not a very intuitive design. You could have just gone with a traditional detent system and moved on with your day. Now the sights that this gun comes with, these aren't sights, okay? These are sight-shaped objects. These pieces of crap plastic things. Just mill out more pick rail sections. Why would you give us this thing? We can put backup sights on here. Now the silver lining for the SP9A3 is the fact that it comes in right around that $850-ish mark without like the brace setup and stuff like that. Will it work? Yes, with some investment in your part. You're gonna have to deal with some of the weird oddities that come with this thing. It is no B&T APC9. But again, if you're just looking for a range toy, any of these guns will work. And if that's what you want, you can save some money and pick up one of these things. Now the CMMG Banshee is the last weapon they're going to be talking about today. This is a pretty cool pistol. Uses what's considered a radially delayed blowback action that's patented by CMMG. There's an M16 bolt carrier group in here that doesn't weigh 20 pounds like a traditional AR9 does. And so that allows for a much lighter recoil impulse. Now it's still an AR9, so you do have some of the upsides and downsides with that, right? You have, you know, the friendly AR controls that you're definitely used to. You have a traditional buffer tube on here. It's actually shortened, which is kind of cool with a shortened buffer. It allows for very quick deployment if that's what you want to use it for. Now, the CMMG Banshee comes in several different configurations. I got the 4.5-inch barrel variety with the burnt bronze finish. Also got the Colt mag lower. They make a Glock mag lower, but as I previously alluded to, I think I'd rather shoot myself in the dick than buy a subgun that feeds from pistol mags. Ultimately, the Banshee works well. Very reliable, very consistent ejection pattern. The recoil impulse is similar to the APC. It's, again, a little more than the MP5, but all of these guns are going to be. That free float barrel is nice in the sense that you can put backup sights on here and, you know, have some freedoms with the accessory mounting options with that M-LOK rail. The magazines are cheap. These ASC mags are like 13, 14 bucks regularly on sale, 32-shot mag. These are very similar in manufacturing as compared to like the HK MP5 mag. Stamped sheet metal and welded around and that sort of stuff, and they work great. Which goes to show you that HK tax exists in every facet of that gun. Now ultimately the Banshee is not some super special gun. It's a light recoiling AR9, that's pretty much it. However, it has two redeemable factors. One, it uses an AR-15 fire control group. And two, has an M16 style bolt carrier group. Makes this Banshee a bit of a rare breed.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bam!
So if you want something that's super freaking fun, the Banshee might be your ticket, depending on your jurisdiction, of course. Other than that, no problems at all running this guy. It's a very fun range toy.
Every time, a new project every few months.
Pricing of this guy starts at about $1,500, $1,600, so about the same as the MP5, but it comes set up with a brace from the get-go, and so there's not a whole lot you need to add to that, save for maybe just an optic and some mags and ammo. So that is pretty much that, guys, to give you just a light overview. If you want something that's cool from like a lore perspective and media and TV and stuff, the MP5 is going to be it. For the absolute lightest recoiling gun, the MP5 is also your ticket. If you're strictly on a budget, don't buy the Stribog. If you want something that's utterly reliable and a little more practical for a PCC, certainly something that's going to recoil lighter than like a Mark 18 and be a lot shorter, the B&T is definitely your ticket. And if you want to just be a goon at the range, I think the CMMG Banshee is the way to go. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, please head over to Lead and Steel. We would be humbled to have your business. Thanks.